Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The heavy oak doors of the cathedral did not open for a bride. They burst open for a scandal. The sound wasn't a choir, but the raw, tearing shriek of a soul breaking in public. Don't do it. Please, Cashin, don't promise yourself to him. The silence that descended upon the St. Jude Cathedral was heavier than the marble pillars supporting the vaulted ceiling. 300 of the city's elite, CEOs, warlords, and old-money aristocrats, froze. At the altar, I stood motionless, my hand halfway to the ring meant for the man standing opposite me. Cashin Thorne, the heir to the Thorne shipping empire. The man who had courted me for 2 years to merge our conglomerates. He looked toward the back of the aisle, his eyes widening not in horror, but in a flicker of arrogant recognition. Running down the aisle, stumbling over the plush red carpet, was a creature that looked more like a shattered porcelain doll than a man. He was small, his suit ill-fitting and cheap, his hair a disheveled halo of soft chestnut. Tears streamed down a face that was undeniably beautiful, though twisted in desperation. He threw himself at Cashin's feet, clutching the pristine white fabric of Cashin's tuxedo pants. "You promised," the boy sobbed, his voice trembling with the distinct, sweet pheromones of an omega in distress. "You said this marriage was just business. You said I was your heart." A collective gasp ripped through the audience. A secret lover. A hidden omega. I watched, my expression carved from ice. "I am Lysander Valerius, the head of the Valerius banking group. I do not tolerate embarrassment. I do not tolerate failure." And yet, here I was, the groom in the wedding of the decade, watching my fiancée's mistress beg for scraps at the altar. Cashin looked down, a flush of embarrassment coloring his cheeks, but quickly replaced by a sneer of annoyance. He tried to kick his leg free, but the boy held on with the grip of the drowning. "Julian, get up," Cashin hissed, loud enough for the first few rows to hear. "You're making a scene. I told you to wait at the apartment." "I can't be a secret anymore, Cashin," Julian cried, looking up, his eyes wide and terrified. "Please. I'll be good. I won't ask for the bond. I won't ask to be your husband. Just don't marry him. Or if you must, let me stay. I'll be anything. I'll be the mistress. I'll be the servant. Just don't throw me away." The pathetic nature of the plea made my stomach turn. It was a display of total submission, a lack of self-preservation that was painful to witness. Cashin laughed nervously, glancing at the crowd, then at me. He had the audacity to shrug, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Lysander, darling," he drawled, trying to regain control. "You know how these omegas get. Clingy. He's a pet project. A stray I took in. He means nothing, but he's quite obedient in the bedroom. Surely, a man of your status understands the need for variety. We can keep him. He can serve us tea in the mornings, warm the bed when you're too busy running the world." The heir left the room. Cashin wasn't just admitting to infidelity. He was suggesting I, an alpha of the highest pedigree, share my home with his weeping discarded toy. He thought me so desperate for the Thorne merger that I would swallow this insult. I looked at Cashin. I saw the greed in his eyes, the weakness in his jaw. Then I looked down at Julian. The boy was shaking. He had heard Cashin's words. Asterisk pet, stray, variety star. The hope in his eyes was shattering, replaced by a hollow, crushing realization that the man he loved viewed him as livestock. I took a step forward. The sound of my dress shoes on the marble was a gunshot in the silence. "You want to keep him?" I asked, my voice low, a baritone rumble that vibrated in the chests of everyone nearby. Cashin smiled, thinking he had won. "Why not? He's broken in already. It's a waste to throw him out." "You are right," I said, unbuttoning my tuxedo jacket. "It is a waste." I turned my gaze to Julian. The omega flinched as my shadow fell over him. He looked up, terrified, expecting me to strike him. Instead, I saw eyes the color of moss and gold, deep and terrified, brimming with a loyalty that had been weaponized against him. "Stand up," I commanded. Julian trembled but obeyed, his legs shaking so hard he nearly fell. He kept his head bowed, exposing the nape of his neck, unmarked. Cashin hadn't even dignified him with a mating bite. "Look at me," I ordered. Slowly, Julian lifted his chin. A single tear tracked through the dust on his cheek. Cassian Thorne offers you a corner of his bedroom, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the cathedral. He offers you the life of a mistress. A secret. A shame. I reached out. The crowd held its breath. I brushed my thumb against Julian's jawline, wiping away the tear. His skin was fever hot, his pheromones smelling of bruised peaches and rain, a scent that, inexplicably, made the beast inside my chest rattle its cage. I offer you something else, I said. Cassian frowned. Lysander, what are you doing? I ignored him. I am canceling this wedding, I announced. You can't. Cassian barked, his face turning red. The contracts, the merger, is dead. I cut him off. I looked back at Julian. I am in need of a partner. Not a business asset, but a spouse. Someone loyal enough to beg at an altar for a man who doesn't deserve him. Someone with fire enough to break down these doors. I extended my hand toward Julian, palm up. Cassian is a boy who plays with toys, I said, my eyes locking onto Julian's. Leave him. Why beg to be the mistress of a weak man, when you can be the husband of a king? Julian stared at my hand. He looked at Cassian, who was now sputtering with rage, looking ugly and small. Then he looked at me, the alpha who had just decimated his ex's reputation and offered him the world. Hey, better alpha, Julian whispered, the first words he had spoken directly to me. The best you will ever find, I promised. Julian hesitated for a heartbeat, then placed his trembling hand in mine. I pulled him into my side, wrapping a protective arm around his waist, unleashing a wave of dominant pheromones, cedar and cold steel, that forced Cassian to step back, choking. Let's go, I said to Julian. We have a wedding to plan. Yours. The drive to my estate was suffocatingly silent. The interior of the limousine was soundproofed, shutting out the chaos of the paparazzi swarming the cathedral steps. Julian sat on the far side of the leather bench, curled into a tight ball, staring out the tinted window. He looked like he was waiting for the executioner. Drink, I said, extending a crystal glass of water. Julian flinched so violently, he hit his elbow against the door. I'm sorry, Alpha, I didn't mean to. Stop, I said. The harshness in my tone was unintentional, a habit of the boardroom, but it made him shut his mouth with an audible click of teeth. I sighed, softening my voice. You are not in trouble, Julian. Drink the water. You're dehydrated. He took the glass with shaking hands. Why? He whispered after a long moment. Why what? Why me? You're Lysander Valerius. You could have anyone. You just destroyed your merger for trash like me. Trash. I repeated the word, tasting the bile in it. Is that what he called you? Julian looked down at his lap. He said I was lucky he let me stay in his apartment. That no one else would want an Omega with no lineage, no money, and a broken history. Cassian Thorne is a liar and a fool, I stated flatly. And I did not do this for charity. I didn't tell him the truth. Not yet. I didn't tell him that when he burst through those doors, my inner alpha didn't roar in anger. It roared in recognition. The concept of fated mates was a fairy tale told to children to make political marriages palatable. I had never believed in it. I was a man of science and profit. But the scent of him, peaches and rain, had bypassed my logic and hot-wired my instincts. It was a biological imperative so strong it nearly brought me to my knees. The idea of Cassian touching him, owning him, had become instantly repugnant. I didn't save him to be a hero. I took him because my instincts screamed mine. However, telling a traumatized Omega that he was my soulmate 5 minutes after meeting him would only terrify him further. He would think it was another manipulation. I need an heir, I lied smoothly. And I need a spouse who owes me everything. A spouse who will never betray me because he knows what the alternative is. It is a transaction, Julian. I give you protection, luxury, and revenge against the man who humiliated us both. You give me loyalty and your presence. Julian absorbed this. It made sense to him. Transactional relationships were safe. They had rules. Kindness was suspicious. I can do that, he whispered, sitting up a little straighter. I can be loyal. I'm very good at being loyal. The tragedy of that statement almost made me break the glass in my hand. The first month was a study in patience. Julian moved through my penthouse like a ghost. He tried to clean the floors until the staff gently stopped him. He tried to cook, burning his fingers, and apologized profusely when I found him bandaging himself in the kitchen. He was waiting for the other shoe to drop. He was waiting for me to demand sex, or to hit him, or to bring home someone else. I did none of those things. I worked. I came home. We ate dinner in a silence that slowly transformed from terrified to companionable. The turning point came during a thunderstorm. I was in my study, reviewing the acquisition papers for Thorn Shipping. Revenge is a dish best served via hostile takeover, when a crash sounded from the hallway. I found Julian on the floor, surrounded by the shards of a Ming vase. He was hyperventilating, his hands clutching his ears, his eyes squeezed shut. I'm sorry, don't lock me in the closet, please, Cashin, I'll be quiet, I promise. He was hallucinating, trapped in a memory triggered by the thunder. I approached him slowly, keeping my pheromones dialed down to a soothing hum. Julian. He scrambled backward, his back hitting the wall. Don't hurt me. I stopped. I sank to my knees, ruining the crease in my trousers, ignoring the $1,000,000 porcelain shards digging into my legs. I am not Cashin, I said, my voice grounding and deep. Open your eyes, Julian. Look at the floor. It's marble, not wood. Look at me. He gasped, his eyes flying open. They were dilated, frantic. He looked at me, really looked at me. Lysander. Yes. You are in the Valerius penthouse. You are safe. No one gets in here unless I allow it. And I do not allow anyone who would hurt you. He slumped forward, the adrenaline leaving him all at once. I caught him before he hit the jagged pottery. I pulled him into my lap, heedless of the glass. He stiffened, then melted. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling deeply. For the first time, he sent me back. He breathed in the cedar and steel, and I felt his body relax in a way it never had before. You smell like safety, he murmured, half delirious. I vowed. I am your fortress, Julian. As long as you are with me, the world cannot touch you. That night, he didn't sleep in the guest room. He didn't sleep in my bed, either. He wasn't ready. But he slept on the chaise lounge in my bedroom, under a heavy duvet, while I worked at my desk, guarding his rest. 3 months later, the invitations went out. The annual winter solstice gala. The event of the season. It would be Julian's debut as my fiancé. We stood in front of the full-length mirror. Julian wore a suit of midnight blue velvet, tailored to accentuate the slim lines of his waist and the curve of his neck. Around his throat sat a choker of diamonds and sapphires, the Valerius engagement collar. It was worth more than the entire Thorn estate. He looked regal. He looked powerful. But his hands were trembling. He will be there, Julian whispered. He will, I confirmed, adjusting his cuffs. He has been trying to contact you for weeks. He knows I am dismantling his company piece by piece. He thinks he can manipulate you into asking me for mercy. Julian looked up at me in the mirror. What if I can't do it? What if I see him and I become small again? I turned him around to face me. You are not small. You are the partner of Lysander Valerius. You have my name, my protection, and tonight. I leaned down, brushing my lips against his ear. Tonight you have my permission to destroy him. The ballroom was a sea of silk and jewels, but it parted like the Red Sea when we entered. My hand rested on the small of Julian's back, a claim visible to everyone. The whispers started immediately, but they weren't mocking this time. They were awestruck. Julian carried himself with a newfound grace, mimicking my posture, my cold detachment. We hadn't been inside for 10 minutes before Cashin Thorn intercepted us. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. The collapse of his stock price had aged him 10 years and 3 months. Lysander, he nodded stiffly, then turned his gaze to Julian. A flicker of the old hunger appeared, mixed with desperation. Julian, you look expensive. I look happy, Cashin, Julian said. His voice wavered slightly, but he held his ground. Cashin stepped closer, invading Julian's personal space. I tensed, ready to snap Cashin's arm, but I held back. This was Julian's fight. Don't play games with me, Jules. Cashin lowered his voice, dropping the pleasantry. I know he's just using you to get back at me. Once he's bored, you'll be on the street. Come back to me. I forgive you for the scene at the wedding. We can go back to how it was. The audacity was breathtaking. Julian stared at Cashin. He looked at the man he had once thought was his universe, and saw him for what he was, a petty, insecure tyrant. Julian laughed. It was a soft, genuine sound that stopped the conversation of the nearby guests. Go back, Julian asked, incredulous. Cashin, do you know what Lysander does when I have a nightmare? Cashin blinked, confused. What? He stays awake, Julian said, his voice gaining strength, ringing clear and true. He reads to me until I fall asleep. Do you know what he did when I burned dinner? He ate it and thanked me. He treats me like a person. You treated me like a prop. Julian took a step forward, forcing Cashin to retreat. I am not a mistress, Julian declared. I am not a secret. And I am certainly not yours. I am the future consort Valerius. And you are trespassing in my sight. Julian turned to me, his eyes shining with adoration and triumph. Alpha, I'm tired of this man's scent. It smells like desperation. Can we go? I smiled, a rare, genuine smile that terrified the onlookers more than my scowl ever could. As you wish, my love. I wrapped my arm around Julian, pulling him flush against me. But before we turned away, I looked at Cashin one last time. By the way, Thorn, I said calmly, my lawyers finalized the acquisition of your flagship port this morning. You are officially bankrupt. Consider it a wedding gift. We walked away, leaving Cashin standing alone in the center of the ballroom, ruined and abandoned, while the world watched the Omega he discarded ascend to a throne he could never reach. Later that night, on the balcony of the penthouse overlooking the city lights, Julian finally stopped trembling. He looked at me, the moonlight catching the diamonds at his throat. Did you mean it? He asked softly. About the port? Or was that just for show? I meant it, I said, pulling him into a kiss that tasted of victory and wine. I told you, Julian. I'm a better alpha. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. Not with chains, but with a crown. If you enjoyed seeing Julian realize his worth and crush his toxic ex, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who tried to kill you, or would you take everything he owns? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,